Hi, very good afternoon. It's Gene from maverickstar. There's a few things I want to get through, and I'm sure you're going to find them very interesting in this video. But let's start by thanking those few people who are prepared to go that little bit more than others. And it's not just because, a lot of people can't afford to donate to us at the observatory. We are in a very awkward climate regarding, global economics. And it's largely, I've got to say this, it is largely because of organisations like the United Nations, beating us down at a time where there are, significant difficulties in economics. And, these things come back to our own homes. They want to raise, ridiculous amounts of money in difficult times. And it's almost like they don't have any feelings, emotions. It's almost like a psychopathic behaviour, very cold, very narcissistic viewpoint on achieving their goals at the misery of millions and millions, in fact billions of us on this earth today. So a huge thanks to those few people that do, and at the end of this video I will mention the link. And again, it's not mandatory. You can help if you want to. It's not just yourselves that get something out of these videos. It's a lot of other people that couldn't ordinarily afford to, subscribe to, an observatory like ours, because simply, they're raising a couple of dollars a day to live on. And there is no way on this earth I could ever take money off people that are so close to that poverty line. So big thanks to all those. Okay, let's move on. So we're looking at, the 100,000 year cycle. I want to bring your attention down to the bottom right hand corner where you can see climate.nasa.gov. Clearly, NASA are aware of the Milenkovic Cycle, which sets up those conditions for our Earth to experience an interglacial, which lasts around 12 to 15,000 years, and then a glacial period, which lasts around 90,000 years. We are going back into a glacial period, whether you accept that or not. We are probably already 2 to 6,000 years returning into that cycle. You can see what happens during an interglacial and a glacial period, and you can see on this this animation slightly exaggerated the orbit of the Earth and how it changes over that time period. You can see where the blue line extends, that we go from a spherical orbit around our sun to a slightly elliptical orbit. And of course, when we move further away from our sun, we experience slightly cooler periods. And it is that which over time sets up the conditions for glaciers on our planet to start expanding. Now, like anything else, we will at some point hit a thermocline. And when we do, things will rapidly from that point on begin to cool. And we may have already started to enter that thermocline. If we look at the glacial rebound at the moment in the Arctic Circle, we can see that 1.8 million square kilometres of ice has replenished over the Arctic Circle right now. And yes, it will be doing the same over the Antarctic. But my point is this, is that they are aware of this. They're aware of the grand solar minimum. I will show you a bit later on. NASA's name is over all of these things, and they are not forthcoming in telling you exactly what the implications are, yet they have gone out their way to set all the mechanisms in place so that you can do the next part, and simply joining up the dots. And don't write off every scientist that works for NASA, because they have achieved some pretty cool things over the last 50, 60 years, and not all of them are bad. A lot of these people do actually care about humanity and, in general, the well-being of the population of the Earth. But you have to remember also that these people are paid by an organisation and regulated by that organisation, and if they start sticking their neck on the line, then it's going to get chopped off at some point. That could mean removal from their position of work, the loss of their pensions, and ridicule of their themselves within the workplace, and a lot of other things as well. But the point is this, we cannot just write off everybody at these organisations because they are not coming forth and pointing out all the dots that we need to see. Now, in the description, I came across, quite a comprehensive list of things in which you should be looking at getting for yourselves and your loved ones. It's a good list, and it covers quite an extensive range, and that'll be in the description for you. It's quite long, and it's well worth a read, and maybe you'll find that if you are doing a little bit of preparing right now, then obviously there might be some things on that list that these professors have put together. And they put the list together, I've got to say this, because they're aware of the dangers and impending dangers of hurricanes, tornadoes, flash floods and droughts, as well as other natural anomalies that can pose severe threat to life and danger and destroy everything that you have worked hard for in your lives. I say, if you had just half the stuff on this list, you would be in a much better position to withstand, some of these things that are inevitably at some point going to get thrown at us. So, NASA are aware of the returning back to the glacial period, and they know it affects the climate. Why else would they be talking about the Milenkovic Cycle, which is a 100,000 year cycle where we go into glacial and interglacial times? And why would they put the word climate next to this? Because they know that this directly is a climate inhibitor, so it will affect the climate. And of course, this is probably a real big up on the high list of things that we should be concerned about, because glacial periods shut down the majority of the Earth's northern and southern hemispheres' agricultural productive lands. With 8 billion people on this planet and a massive reduction in the ability to put crops into the ground and get those yields out to feed those millions and billions of people, it is not going to be easy. And of course, there is no real effort from any of these world governments to even actively start planning and preparing for it. What I'm saying, you think, oh, they've got preparations already set aside. They haven't. I guarantee you that now. They have not. There might be some very well-known people like Bill Gates, which is heavily investing a lot of money in artificial foods right now, using alternative methods, printed 3D foods and fruits and meats, and maybe he has an inkling of what is coming, and he knows there's going to be a shortage of food, and we're going to have to probably resort to other alternative means, to feed the cities. The cities right now, guys, are heavily dependent on things being imported into them, and this is why I say, we've been sold a dream which is slowly becoming a nightmare. All the amenities was in the city 30-40 years ago, and it attracted people out from the rural areas of communities to go and live in them, because you had regular access to flowing clean water you could drink straight out the tap. You could just pop down to your local supermarket and pick up all your groceries that you would need, and then within the same convenient space you could just pop on a bus for maybe 20 minutes drive and get to work, and then come back home on the evening and earn a salary which would pay you enough to live in the city and be left over monies for enjoyments. That's all gone. And what people don't realise is the cities are stagnant and they are not sustainable. We don't have enough people talking about cities right now, because my advice to anybody would be consider leaving before it's too late, because it could be any one of these anomalies that would shut that city down, and you don't want to be one of those individuals left in that city at that point in time. Let's just look at a possible scenario. And we know that this isn't pipe dreams or, science fiction. This actually happened. I'm talking about the Carrington Event. This was a coronal mass ejection of the Sun of the X-class calibre, which hit Earth. And at that point in time, there wasn't that much technology. It was mainly telegraphs. But that surge in energy off that CME, or the coronal mass ejection, or the solar wave, was enough to set those telegraph poles on fire. If we had the same event or similar happen today, and let's face it, in the last 100 years we have had a weakening of our magnetosphere, which is a shield that protects us from such things, not completely, but even in the Carrington Event, they was happily enjoying, in the 1800s, a full protective magnetosphere strength. We are 20% down on that, and we are heavily invested in electronics. And even with just moderate CMEs, today we have had to change a lot of the way we do business, and I'll talk about aviation for one. On the Dreamliner aircraft, Boeing's Dreamliner, they had to put a secondary CPU system in line with the avionics, because what happened on one of them flights, which you can check the history of, it suffered a strike on the CPU board, which rendered the computer dormant for around, I think, a matter of seconds or maybe a minute. But at that point in time, that aircraft was completely out of control, and the pilots were locked out from controlling it, and it was diving, banking, and you can imagine you wouldn't want to have been on that plane at that time. Luckily enough, the computer CPU did reset, but after that incident, Boeing added extra CPU protection and other CPUs, so if one should suffer a strike, then the redundant system would automatically kick in and do something, in terms of giving and keeping the pilots in control of that aircraft. So even with moderate CMEs, solar winds, it just shows how vulnerable our equipment is. Now, if we had a Carrington Event, there wouldn't be nothing you could do about it. All those systems that run nuclear power stations would go offline. You can imagine the levels of danger just involved in the nuclear power stations we have in this world. Then your sewerage would go offline, your water pumping stations would go off the line, and then we could look at logistical things that would go offline, like, what would happen if just the fuel stations went offline? They couldn't get electricity to run the pumps in the pump stations. What about the tills and the ATM machines that wouldn't work? All these things are why I say, you know what, it is no longer an attractive place to stay in a city, because when the logistics stop moving into the city, then what? There's not enough land for people to grow their own food overnight, and that is a skill that requires many years to get your farms green enough to grow your own crops. You cannot do this on a balcony like some people say. Forget it. You ain't going to grow food on a balcony or in your living room, which is going to sustain you, never alone the family members. You just aren't going to do it. Excuse me. So you need to start seriously thinking about these things, because these three anomalies are right on our front door now. And we was lucky not to be fortunate to be living in Libya a few weeks ago, or over the last week, because right now 5,000 people are dead, 10,000 missing, hundreds of thousands of people displaced, which means they have no home. They have very little in food supplies. They are heavily reliant on whatever the government is doing, which I believe is not a great deal at the moment. They're relying on, all these emergency charity organisations to get in there. They are dealing now with cholera because the sewerage is all over the streets. The mud is all over the streets. Any food that wasn't in, sealed containers is not usable or edible. There is no clean drinking water. There is, a national catastrophe taking place in that country right now. And it isn't just countries like that are susceptible to this now. It can be anywhere in the world. So we're moving on to the grand solar minimum, which is a decaying activity over, as you can see, the last 3 solar cycles, and it's continuing to solar cycle 25 as well, by the way. We will be in solar maximum at solar cycle 25 within the next couple of years, and the sunspots are already below the numbers that they should be during a healthy solar cycle of around 11 years. What you can see here is, exponentially disappearing off the chart. When they do add solar cycle 25 on there, it will not show equilibrium, which means it hasn't got to a point where it could possibly start showing signs of, improvement. But I want to draw your attention to the bottom of the screen so that you know who produced this chart. Yes, Hathaway, NASA, MSFC was the people responsible for showing cycles 24 and the sunspot number prediction, as you can see on the above of the chart. Now, again, NASA are showing you that they are aware of what's going on, but they're not telling you the implications of what this means. They never do, because what they should be saying is not just showing us a chart like this. They should be saying that, not only are we going through the cycles of 100,000 years, which put us into glacials and glacial periods, and that the majority of the northern and southern hemispheres may go offline in the not too distant future because of a thermocline acceleration. But, not only will food become scarce and harder to get out of the grounds in those agricultural productive regions of the world, but the solar activity is diminishing, and that is going to also make it difficult for you to grow crops in these regions, and in the regions where it is probably more prominent to grow around that equatorial region. And the reason for that is because this compounds on another problem that we are dealing with right now. And again, NASA are not going to join the dots for you. They're just going to present you with the information, and they're going to leave it for you to work out what you need to do at that point in time. And you should already know what to do at this point in time, because things are not getting any better. They're not getting better with the natural cycles of nature on our planet, the natural cycles of our sun, and they are not certainly getting better with the human impact and behaviour with relationship to global economics. We are facing a catastrophe on multiple layers at this present time. It's not about making you frightened. It's about, trying to bring the awareness of these things to you in a logical way, using data, using science, so that you can make, an informed decision for what is best for yourselves in the short term and long term future, and what is best for your families and loved ones and your communities. That is what these videos are all about. That's why I thought today I'll put that list of that comprehensive list of things you might need, because what we're dealing with all these things is a climatic issue, a very serious climatic problem of massive changes taking place to our planet. This isn't science fiction, this is science fact, backed up by some of the best organisations in the world, and followed up by smaller observatories like ourselves that have dedicated equipment to monitoring a couple of these events. We can't monitor everything, we just simply don't have the money to do that. It would be great if we could raise enough cash to employ a few more people, put more equipment out there, because the more equipment we've got out there in the field, the more data we're getting back, the more information we can obtain from that data, and the more we can inform you on, what is going on. We can make forecasts, better ones than what we're doing already, but we're on the ball. Even as a small observatory, we don't have the budget of NASA or some of the larger observatories. On the budget that we've got, we're doing a fantastic job in keeping people informed of these current events that are taking place. And hopefully, some people are listening and paying attention, and they're doing something about it other than just thinking, because you need to be participating in proactive engagement at this point in time. The time for just sitting there and thinking are long gone. You need to be more proactive and do something, because not doing nothing is not going to improve your situation if you find yourself experiencing some of these anomalies that other people have done. Even in the last 12 months, I predicted 50,000 people this year alone will die. We're probably over that figure already, due to just ordinary weather-related anomalies. You can help yourselves cope much better if you do find yourselves in some of these situations by simply being informed, maybe having a heads up, an early warning, or gathering a few preparations for yourselves. I wanted to talk a little bit longer on this subject, but I know your time is very valuable to you, and there is always another day, and maybe tomorrow we'll talk about some more of the things that we are going to be having to deal with, and the decisions that we're going to be having to make in the near, not too distant future. Until then, guys, I will mention just briefly that link down there. It'd be amazing if we could just encourage more people to help. It really would. But on that note, we'll leave it there. There is a link if you want to help support what we do at the observatory. I really hope you do. And the only thing for me to say at this point is please pay attention to some of the things that we discuss in these videos. It is about protecting you, your loved ones, your family, your community, and your fellow brother around this world. I'll say what I usually do, as always. Bye for now.